Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Thanks so much for joining me here again today. This is part 2 of a discussion that I started last week, talking about rising above the fear of death. And I mentioned last week I was conversing with ChatGPT actually about this topic, and ChatGPT said something that I found somewhat profound, which was, what if it isn't about rising above the fear of death? What if it's about diving beneath the fear of death and looking at what's underneath it, what came before, what precipitated the fear of death? And that's just something I'd never thought of before. And so I did last week's episode on that subject, and also ChatGPT suggested 5 doorways to explore death. And I wanted to I'll just recap those. And then, as I promised this week, I will read some verses from the Tao of Death to go with these doorways. So the first doorway was number 1, which Chat already mentioned. Look beneath the fear. What is the fear made of? Is it pain, abandonment, non-existence, unfinished business? Number 2 is learn to die before you die, which is part of all great mystical traditions. A teaching of all mystical traditions, to let go of ego attachments, identities, illusions of control, and that surrender itself can be sacred. Number 3 is to practice presence. The fear of death lives in the imagined future, and I talked about that quite a bit, that this fear is actually what we imagine might happen in the future, whereas peace lives in the present moment. And so staying in the present moment is essential. And number 4 was to connect to something larger than us, whether that's God, spirit, the universe, love, recognizing that we're held by something greater. We're part of something bigger than us, the universe. And then number 5 was speak the fear aloud. Don't carry it alone. Talk to others and recognize that we're connected to others in our fear of death. So I wanted to go back through each one of these doorways that ChatGPT mentioned and tie in the book, The Tao of Death, which was my adaptation of the Tao Te Ching, which is an ancient Chinese text written by, we think, Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher. And the Tao Te Ching consists of 81 verses that are really verses that the Tao means the way. And so it's really the way things are, or the way, how we live, how we survive, how we get through this, the Tao. And so I did an adaptation of those 81 verses to include death and recognition of death within the verses, and titled it The Tao of Death, or The Way of Death. And so what this book, The Tao of Death, has become, it actually is a book for contemplation. The 81 verses can be read. You could read 1 verse a day and journal on it and contemplate it. You could read 1 a week and do a lengthy series of contemplations and review each one of the verses for an entire week every day and write different perspectives on it or different things that you learn from it. And so it's one of the ways that the Tao Te Ching is really valuable for that type of contemplative, reflective process. And I'd like to think the Tao of Death is as well, and can be utilized in this way to help us with the fear of death. And so I picked out some of the verses. Lots of verses in here cover all of these doorways. They cover more than one of these topics. I picked out some to share with you. It was a hard choice because there are many that actually fit really well. The 5 doorways to explore death. The first, again, is look beneath the fear. And what is the fear made of? This is verse number 70 that I chose. And I'll just read it to you. The way of death is not hard to understand if you don't overthink it. It's not hard to practice if you don't try to control everything. Death comes for everyone, whether they have prepared for it or not. That's a simple fact, as old as time. Yet most people don't understand it because they avoid thinking about death. If you want to learn the way of death, just keep looking deeply inside your own suffering. You'll find a precious gem hidden within its distressing disguise. And I chose this verse because it emphasizes look deeply inside at your own suffering, because that's really where our fear of death arises from, our old wounds, old traumas that may have happened in the past. And it's really the hidden parts of us, the shadow parts of us that we're afraid of. And death exists within that shadow when we haven't spent any time contemplating it and making space for it in our lives. So this idea of look beneath the fear, go deeper within, that is reflected in this verse 70. And the idea that you'll find a precious gem hidden within its distressing disguise. And that's so true of death, that death is frightening, distressing, uncomfortable for us. And yet when we sit with it and actually allow ourselves to look at it, there is a gem hidden inside of tremendous value. And so it's worth it. And then don't deny, but embrace and accept this part of the verse. Death comes for everyone, whether they have prepared for it or not. And so in a way, all of our admonishments, make sure you plan ahead and prepare for your death. In some ways, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change the fact that death will still arrive at your doorstep one day. And that's a simple fact, as old as time, said the verse. Yet most people don't understand it because they avoid thinking about death. So the advice in this verse was don't overthink it and don't try to control everything, but just sit with it and allow yourself to be with it. And go within and look beneath your fear to understand where it arises from. What is the source of the fear? And so I really like that. I loved that suggestion from ChatGPT, and I like that I was able to find a verse that went with it. So the second doorway is to die before you die. And this, as I said, it's part of all mystical traditions, really. And it means to experience little deaths, and most of those little deaths are comprised of letting go of ego attachments, learning how to let the ego go. And if for the ego, each time we let go of an attachment, it is like a death, a little death that the ego suffers. But that's part of this process of getting over the fear of death, getting through it and beyond it and understanding it, is to allow these little deaths to occur, to allow ourselves to slowly, gradually detach from some of the material things of the world that we care about so much. And as a verse from the Tao of Death to go with this, this number 2 doorway, learn to die before you die, I chose verse number 76. And there are many, many verses here that fit. I found quite a few, and so I had a hard time deciding which one to use. But I'll read this one to you. In the cycle of life and death, all things are soft and supple at birth, like a newborn baby or a tiny sapling, and become stiff and hardened before death. So flexibility is a sign of life, while rigidity is a sign of death. The ego creates rules that are hard and fast, while the soul is infinitely adaptable. When the ego is in charge, every breeze can break you, like a brittle tree in a storm. But when the soul guides your life, you will bend easily with the winds of change. The ego will one day die. The soul will exist for eternity. the way of death helps you see the difference. And so this is a really important point, that the more we let go of the ego attachments, the more we become guided by the soul, by our higher wisdom, our higher selves. And so the more we are moving toward love and peace, the things that really matter, and away from materialism, greed, fear, grasping for things, striving. And the ego, again, creates hard and fast rules that hurt us when they break, when they can't be maintained. And when the ego is in charge, we're more fragile and easier to break. Every breeze can break you if the ego is in charge. But when the soul guides your life, you're flexible. You can bend easily with the winds of change. So you can cope with all sorts of changes. You can cope with all the losses of life when the soul is guiding you. And so that is the passage on die before you die. We have to willingly let go of some of our attachments. And the more we cling to things staying the same as they always were, the more we hold up our evolution and growth, the more we make ourselves stuck in one place in a rut, and the more miserable we become, actually. So once we recognize this and we begin to let go of the ego and its desires and turn toward the higher self, the soul, and its guidance, then the more we get into the flow of life and the more easily things come to us, not necessarily riches and wealth, but the more we find what really matters. We find true treasures. We find the gem within death. We find love and deeper meaning in life. So that is doorway number 2, die before you die. And the third doorway is to practice presence and to remember that the fear of death lives in the imagined future while peace lives in the present moment. And so we need to find ways to help us return to the present moment. I found 2 verses that I really liked. They're both a little bit long, but I'm going to go ahead and read this. Know when to speak and when to be silent. Be like the wind that blows for a time then stops, or the rainstorm that comes and goes. The laws of nature allow for everything to have a beginning and an ending, except that you cannot change nature. If you open yourself to the way of death, then you can embody what really matters and bring it to the world. If you become enlightened, then you can use your higher vision to shine light for humankind. If you learn to live with loss, then you can help others accept the losses that continually arise in the cycle of life and death. If you do not fear death, you can trust your own true nature. Listen to your intuition and everything will unfold as it should. And so this verse is talking about learning to flow with the ways of nature, the cycle of life and death, and opening yourself to the way of death, accepting death, and truly embodying it in order to live what really matters and bring it into the world. And you can use your higher vision then to help light the way for other people when you learn how to live with loss and how to accept the losses that arise in the cycle of life and death. And so in a way, this is a bridge to the previous verse about dying before you die. And then the second verse I chose is verse 60. Just as food should be cooked gently without overstirring, life should be allowed to unfold without too much meddling or control. If you live according to what really matters, you won't need to worry about preventing bad things from happening. When you're in harmony with the way of death, then whatever comes your way is an experience to be embraced and your next opportunity for learning. This is the best way to minimize evil in the world. Be in harmony in everything you do in your own life. And I really like this verse a lot because of the emphasis on staying in harmony, not meddling or trying to control too much, allowing life to unfold around you, and not waste your energy on trying to prevent bad things from happening, to the extent that, yes, we try to always do the next right thing. We try to walk in the steps of goodness and do the best thing, which is preventive in some ways of bad things happening. And yet bad things happen to good people all the time. And we honestly cannot prevent them. And if we focus too much energy and attention on trying to prevent loss or something painful from happening, we end up not really living our actual life, because once again, we're living in the imagined future instead of the present moment. And so we have to learn to live in harmony with the fact that there will be little deaths, that change is happening always around us. That is the way of death. And that is also the beauty of life, and the gift of life is that change happens constantly, and death is part of the cycle. And once you can be in harmony with the way of death, then you can learn to live with whatever comes your way. It becomes an experience to be embraced, and your next opportunity for learning, which goes along with my most recent post in Soul Code talking about life, is a classroom. And everything that happens to you is part of your curriculum for life. And as soon as you recognize that, you stop fighting life and what is unfolding around you, and start learning how to truly live it and experience it in the most beautiful way. And so the fourth doorway for dealing with the fear of death, according to ChatGPT, is to connect with something larger than ourselves. And I think this is extremely important advice to remember, that we're, as I talked about last week, we're in some ways a tiny little blip in all of the universe, in all of history. And yet we're also essential, because the universe would not be the same had we not existed and were we not here right now at this moment. So to go along with this doorway, connect to something larger, I chose verse 39, which says, "The way of death has existed since the beginning of time, and all of the universe reveals its qualities. The sky contains both light and darkness. Stars are born and eventually die. The planets orbit with balance and harmony. Nature reveals the abundance of life that is nourished by death. Great teachers who know the way of death bring much needed wisdom to the world. Without the cycle of life and death, none of this would exist. The sky would be forever black, the stars would burn out, planets would implode, nature would become extinct, and humankind would vanish. Remember that all of the life that we cherish exists because of the death of something else. Life is built upon a foundation of death. Thus, the truly wise are humble, understanding that there is no greatness without death. Wholeness, health, and true wealth must embrace death as an essential part. The one who knows the way of death values the common stone even more than the polished jewel." And so I just love this verse, reminding us of the whole universe, that planets and stars die, that death is part of the cycle and the existence of the entire universe. It's built in to life itself as we know it from where we stand on this planet. That's why we need to learn the way of death. We need to learn about death and understand it. We need to contemplate it and sit with it and allow it to be part of our lives, so that we can participate in this cycle of life and death and take our proper place without fear, without resistance and resentment and anger and victimhood, but with gratitude that we get to be part of all of this. We get to be part of this vast picture of the universe and experience it. And so that fourth doorway, connecting to something larger, I think that is is huge and extremely important for most of us. That is the way that we are going to overcome our fear, is to stay connected to what is bigger than us. The fourth doorway is to speak the fear aloud. And I talked last week about the idea of speaking to others, talking about death, talking about your fears, bringing them out in the open, because you will find other people to connect with who are experiencing the same thing. And then the verse that I chose for today has a slightly different take, which is actually becoming a teacher, in a sense, for other people once you connect with your own fear. And once you understand it and can carry it and live with it better, being able to teach others. And this is verse number 49. The wise teacher knows what really matters. She can relate to anyone of any belief or level of consciousness. She treats all people with kindness, whether they themselves are kind or unkind. That is the true nature of kindness. She extends her trust to everyone equally, whether they are honest or deceitful. That is the true nature of trust. She can find meaning in every event of life, whether joyful or painful. That is the true nature of the way of death. The wise teacher finds a way to connect with everyone, even though no one understands how she does it. But they want to learn from her because she is comfortable with both life and death. So I guess here I'm saying this fifth doorway to speak the fear aloud is to become the wise teacher who finds a way to connect with everyone and finds commonality with everyone, regardless of what they believe or think, or even how they behave and how they treat other people. To find a connection because you understand life and death. You understand how things work in the world and the universe, and because you're able to share it with love and compassion with other people. So that is how you speak about death, bring the fear out into the open and speak about it with other people as a wise teacher. And we need wise teachers in our world right now more than anything. So that was verse 40. And as I said, verse 49 of the Tao of Death. And as I said, I feel like the Tao of Death is a good study guide if it resonates with you at all. Granted, it's somewhat obtuse, and so you have to meditate on it. It doesn't just, hit you directly. You have to sit with it and sit with the verses, and you find your own meaning within these verses. And the original Tao Te Ching is also wonderful and beautiful, and you could study that as well if you prefer not to do the Tao of Death. But I just wanted to recommend it as a possible pathway if you are looking to improve your own comfort with death, your own understanding of death and connection with death. I think this book, The Tao of Death, could become a study guide that you might find helpful. And if you get the book, you'll find a resource in the back for a study guide and journal prompts that you can use for each verse as you go through the book to help you with your own contemplation of these verses. So I just wanted to let you know about the book and how it might be helpful as we work on getting comfortable with our own fear of death. And I encourage you might want to take a look at the Soul Code post about life as a classroom and the curriculum that we have to learn from during our lives. That's on my Substack post for this week. And then I'll be back next week with another new topic for you. And thank you for joining me here today. So remember that we're here for love, which means we're also here for grief, because they go hand in hand. They arrive together in our lives. So face your fear of death, as we've been talking about these past 2 weeks. Be prepared for whatever life brings your way, whatever your curriculum of life happens to be, and just find a way to love each and every moment of your very precious existence here on planet Earth. Bye-bye.